Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Melanin Margin, the weekly chat show where conversations about race are never off the table. We're your hosts, Quaviondre Williams.
And Daquon Wilson.
So let's get into this week's conversation. What's hot on the table this week?
In an article written by Avril Fong, we learn about the latest installment of Marvel's What If Miles Morales series, What If Miles Morales Became Thor number 4, and how it sparked major controversy and backlash online, with fans calling out the comic book giant for racist depictions of black people and communities. The new Asgardian edition of Miles Morales sees the young Afro-Latino Spider-Man take up the helm of Thor Odinson in an edition celebrating 60 years of the friendly neighborhood web-slinger. Recently, the release of this new comic melding the two superheroes' backstories has stirred up a fair amount of controversy and critique online. What If Miles Morales Became Thor is written by Yehudi Mercado and has art by Luigi Zangaria and Paco Medina, none of whom are black themselves. The decision by writer Mercado to use the phrases "by Odin's fade," "Asgard in his hood," "bruv," "right up to your face and dish you" has been called out as a bad imitation of Black/African American Vernacular English, or AAVE, and a graffiti Mjolnir, Thor's hammer. Similarly, the artist's choices to show romanticized yet stereotypical depictions of minority cultures, communities, and urban living have been said to perpetuate racist archetypes. Responding to this controversy, Twitter user at Borg Posting heavily criticized the writer, saying, apparently, the writer is doubling down against criticism, saying that Miles Morales was invented by a white guy, which then I guess makes gross stereotypes and caricatures of black and brown people and their communities okay because a white dude says so. So, Andre, I want to ask you, why do you think Hollywood still allows white people to have way more opportunities to write stories about black characters and people of color?
Well, I think we all know the answer is racism, but
Period.
I do think that there is an even more ignorant reason as to why this keeps happening. Like, I think that when white Hollywood executives hear that their audiences want more stories revolving around people of color and black people on screen, that's the only thing that they hear. Their solution for that is just to create more diverse casts on screen, or in this case on paper. But that's not what we asked for. We asked for authentic stories told from voices and perspectives of those who have experienced life as part of the marginalized community that they are giving voice to. It's not about meeting a diversity quota or trying to be woke. It's about giving marginalized communities the same opportunities to tell their stories as cishet white men have had since the beginning. I mean, when things like this happen, it's just so disappointing because it's it's like these companies keep missing the point. Like, I don't
Hmm.
want to watch another gay coming of age story written by a straight person with no experience in the community. I don't want to hear about a trans person's experiences being written by a cis person who has never had to struggle with gender dysphoria. And I definitely don't want to read another story about a black person's experiences written from a white or non-black perspective. Like, this is the reason this is so disrespectful and offensive, outside of the obvious incorrect use of AAVE and overused stereotypes, is that this was the perfect opportunity for Disney slash Marvel to show marginalized communities that they care about their voices being heard. Just as they said that they would take extra care to listen to Peter Dinklage when he brought up the Snow White remake and how it could negatively impact the dwarfism community, they could do the same thing with all marginalized communities. But when I look at this comic and the fact that it passed through so many hands before making it to publication, all this makes me think is that yet again, whiteness and money still supersedes all. They want the benefits and support from those within the marginalized communities without actually employing people from those communities. And the fact that Marvel employed a Jewish Mexican man to tell the story of an Afro-Latina superhero without consulting or hiring an Afro-Latina to help tell the story, to me, is willful ignorance. But what really pisses me off is the fact that Yehudi Mercado was the only one who apologized for this comment, because he did. You know, in a statement issued on Twitter, Mercado stated that he was pledging to donate what Marvel paid him for writing this comic to Brooklyn Book Bodega, which works to build literacy and get more books to kids in NYC. And while I do agree that part of the responsibility definitely does fall on him, the brunt of that responsibility should be on Marvel, because people have been dog walking Mercado, yet that same energy isn't being given to Marvel, who not only hired him, but edited and approved this comic for publication. And as a society, I think that we still hold a marginalized person more accountable than the larger, predominantly white conglomerate Marvel, right? Like, if anyone should have been making donations and apologizing, it should have been Marvel. Mercado's donation wasn't nearly as much as what Marvel could have donated from their $4 billion fortune. And even if Marvel did apologize and make some sort of pledge, either by money or just pretty words about how they'll work to include more diversity in their writers, the fact is, if you apologize and the issue persists, then it's not an apology, it's bullshit. But Daquon, I want to pass the question back to you. What do you think why do you think this keeps happening?
Like you said, it's racism. And it's literally because when, these studios like Marvel want to make these new stories, quote unquote, about diverse cast, they want to go with the safe option. They want to go with the writers that they already know, the writers that they already know writes, something that is more marketable and profitable. They don't want to take a chance on new Black writers that they never worked with in the past. I mean, think about how often you see like that one token of representation as a writer writing literally every single part of representation for a certain studio or something like that. Like the amount of times Lin-Manuel Miranda has written about like diverse casts, because like they know who he is and they're not going to take a chance on anybody else like they would him. And it's really frustrating because you can tell the inauthentic voice of the characters. Like, I'm sorry, when I heard By Odin's Fade, I literally could not believe that somebody wrote that. Like, how do you write that? Who says that? And I think that's the biggest thing. I'm hearing these phrases and I'm like, nobody I know who actually speaks AAVE in any type of regional dialect says things like that. And so it creates not only this inauthentic voice, but, this caricature, because it's something that's so out there and so disconnected from reality. It's basically like watching a minstrelsy, because it's so damaging to the perceptions of Black people and Afro-Latinx people, because you don't see that authentic voice. You just get that character, you get that romanticization of, the hood and all of these other things. And it's like, no, we don't want to see this. Like you said, we want authentic stories. We not only want Black characters, but we want Black cast members. We not only want Black writers, we want Black, production assistants, Black executive producers. We want Black people and people of color all throughout the process. So we make sure that we are doing our due diligence with representing a community well. And it's especially frustrating because you see the times when these big companies do something right. Like Black Panther was monumental for so many Black people in this country. Encanto by Disney was so important for many Latinx and Afro-Latinx people, because people saw not only white Hispanic people and Latinx people, but they saw Latinx people of all different shades and colors and saw that core family structure. And so it's frustrating when we see something take a step forward, and instead of continuing to push the envelope, they take that step forward and then they just go back to what they know best, and that's creating caricatures. And so I think that it's this problem that really needs to be solved in Hollywood. But frankly, so many people are not willing to take that risk unless they know that it's going to make a profit.
Exactly. I fully agree. And I think that, no one is saying that, all movies and TV shows that revolve around marginalized people have to exclusively be created, produced, written, directed by people from that community. But, the dream would be that everyone can write stories about all different types of communities without having to rely on harmful stereotypes and negative depictions. Unfortunately, that's not the case. We live in a white Christian male dominated society, so it makes that kind of theoretical living very difficult to achieve. The problem that a lot of authors face when writing about communities that they don't exist in is the fact that they don't ask the important questions like you just brought up. For instance, am I creating these characters with an understanding that what I'm writing is an authentic part of the experience in that community, and am I the right person to tell the story? Like, for example, most people could imagine how difficult it could be coming out as a gay person in a religious household. But a straight person who has never struggled with their sexuality or grappled with coming out in a religious family will never be able to provide the story with the nuance specific to that experience. That's the key that so many producers and writers and executives miss when they are creating stories for marginalized communities. Like, just like you brought up with Encanto, let's take a look at a show like Pose. Sure, a talented writer like Ryan Murphy could imagine what it would be like to be gay in the 1980s. However, as a white gay man, he will never be able to grasp the experience of what it's like to be gay and Black in the 80s or struggling with HIV. So his inclusion of Our Lady J, an HIV positive trans woman, Janet Mock, a Black trans woman, and Steve Canals, an openly queer Afro-Latino man, in the writing process provides such a successful show with nuance that made it so relatable and so successful to so many different audiences. There's a level of sensitivity and awareness that is necessary for a person to have if they are not a part of that community, but they're taking on the process of writing for that community. I know that I've probably told this story before on the podcast, but about a year ago, I was writing a story or developing a story that was going to include an Italian American character. However, when I originally approached how I was going to introduce the character to the story, I immediately thought of a mob storyline. But before I started writing, though, I did a quick Google search to see whether or not, writing a story about a character who happened to be Italian and having mom connections was racist. And guess what Google said? Absolutely fucking yes. Like, that is fully racist as shit. And I was able to adjust my approach accordingly, right? But
right.
I don't have the same, I don't have Marvel, Disney, or some big name author money to afford sensitivity readers, test groups, and surveys. But if I was able to use Google for free to see if the way I was approaching a community I wasn't a part of was racist, then I know it would be a cakewalk for them with all the resources at their disposal. So I don't really give a fuck about the whole we'll try harder next time spiels or donating money hoping to make it all go away, but not actually making a commitment to change. Like in 2022, with so many examples of people doing the work and it paying off, like with Black Panther, it's looking less and less like honest mistakes and looking a lot more like a choice not to do it better. But Daquon, I wanted to ask you, do you think it is ever okay to tell stories about a community that you are not a part of? And is there a way to do it respectfully?
I think when it comes to telling a story, when you are creating a character, you have to walk in the shoes of said character. And that's not to say that you have to be all of the identities that the character you are writing is, but it's all about understanding where they come from. If you're writing a character from a particular place, go to that place, see what it's like, see the sights, see the type of things that that character would be growing up around and doing and living with. It's not just enough to write a character and say, all right, this is going to be this Black person from New Orleans. Like, no, go to New Orleans, understand what Black people in New Orleans have been going through, do your research, study that history. And then once you can basically walk in the shoes of that character, that is when it's okay to write that character, because it comes off as disrespectful when you don't even afford the time to give a character the respect that they deserve. It comes off as disrespectful when you basically create a character without actually caring to get that character as authentic as possible. And like you said, you did it through a super simple Google search. These are multi-million and multi-billion dollar companies and studios. They can afford to hire a sensitivity reader. They can afford to hire somebody to just be a part of the process, to get that actual experience and to understand what that character would be around, so that they are not writing bruv and by Odin Fade and in his Asgardian hood. Like, no. Actually create characters that are real and authentic and not these caricatures.
Daquon, say that one more time, bitch. Create real people. Real people.
Real people. Not these by Odin's Fade caricatures. I can't get over that.
That shit. Baby, what black person? It's like they literally Googled, like, okay, let me watch some movie about black people that was written by a white person. Ah, yes, Odin's Fade.
They probably heard somebody say "catch this fade" or something like that, and just like completely took it out of context. Did not think about actually how AAVE as a grammatical and its grammatical structures actually work.